But what I do know is that the formula is the same no matter what. And this is what I mean by that. If you put in the work, right? If you have core values about certain things that you believe, right? I fundamentally believe that the talents and the gifts that have been given to me are not for me to benefit, but for me to make a way for other people.
Time to embrace change and be about that life. This is Dr. Batts with the About That Life podcast, the podcast about life or living intentionally forever. We have seen miraculous things occur this year, changes both at the state, national, and international level with respect to government. Many of us are confused, worried, concerned about what that means, but we know that through great leadership, vision, and ideas, we can pull through anything. Well, the guest I have on today is not only a leader in that space, a brain trust in that space. He's also a very, very close friend of mine. And he's been on the show before, but I felt like that during these tumultuous times, I needed to reach out to someone, right? I needed to talk to someone who could give me a more even keel on how to articulate some of these changes. Some good, some I'm not going to say bad, but some don't provide a lot of optimism for us. But I wanted a proverbial expert to really come and talk to us about leadership and how it can affect us at multiple levels. Our civic responsibility is to understand and appreciate the things that the government does for us. But if we don't understand the general tenets of what that means, it's tough to do. Now, without any further ado, I know you all are itching to find out who this gentleman is with over 22 years of combined military service, meritorious service medal, president of the largest African-American fraternity in the world. He has served as mayor. He's run for lieutenant governor of North Carolina. He's the president of a college. I could keep going, but we never would bring him on. I want to present to some and introduce to others my friend, my partner, Chris Ray Esquire. He's a lawyer, by the way. How you doing, Chris?
I'm good, my brother.
Sure. Call you Mr. Ray. I'm President Ray. Hold on. Let me make sure I get it right.
Well, I mean, since you've known me since I was 12, I think you've earned the right to just
okay.
I think we're good.
Well, again, like I say, every time, and for everybody out there, we talk fairly frequently because it's good to have an accountability partner that challenges you to be better than the version you think is your best. And that's what he does, right? Because I'll tell him something I'm doing, and then he'll say, and what's next?
That's right.
Well, isn't that big enough? But he has this idea that if you can accomplish your goals by yourself, you're not dreaming big enough. And if he would have told me 2 years ago, hey, I'm going to take over, I didn't mean to say take over, but when you think about it, it's a mindset thing. When I'm going to shift the mindset of a local community to support an HBCU that, for all intensive purposes, was in a place where growth was a target, but again, it was hard to hit. And then to go and see the community, corporations all buying into, not necessarily his ideal, but the ideal of the people around him was just a moving experience. So, a lot of people wonder, Chris, what got you to that space? How did you get into this space?
Yeah, as I was sharing with you before we started the show, I spoke this morning at Jones Chapel Missionary Baptist Church in Laurinburg, North Carolina. So I got to, shout them out. They invited me. They had HBCU Day. And I told them the story of how, you have a plan for your own life. And then God has a plan for you. And so, which plan is going to probably take over is going to probably be God's plan. I one day was just on Facebook, just surfing. I saw a news article that came up about Barber-Scotia College. I read the article, was like, wow, I said, let me see what I can do. Let me reach out to the chair of the board of trustees. And my thought was maybe I'll do a fundraiser. I know that, resources was a challenge for the school. Maybe I'll get to sit on a committee, maybe I'll get put on the board of trustees. Nowhere in the plan was it that I would be considered to be the president of the college. That wasn't even on my things to do list. And of course it was presented to me. I was very hesitant in the very beginning. I don't jump out of airplanes no more, as I like to say, so I'm a walker, right? So, the military, you run a lot, but I walk now. And, I got up every morning and I went to Barber-Scotia for about 7 days and I walked around the campus for 7 days, to to see if this was something that I needed to do. I needed to hear from God. And I'm telling you, one morning, it was like on the 6th or 7th morning, I saw new buildings. I saw students walking across the campus. I just saw the revitalization of the institution like it was clear as day. And I said, all right, God, I got it. This is my assignment. Let me go ahead on and get to it. So I applied. It was me and a few other gentlemen, other candidates that applied for the position. And I ended up, pulling it out. And here I am now. I get the honor and the privilege to serve as the 20th president of Barber-Scotia College, the second oldest HBCU in North Carolina founded, the 17th oldest HBCU in the country ever founded, the first institution founded in the South for all Black women. In 1867, it was the first institution of higher education for Black women in the South. And so very proud of the lineage of the institution. I mean, Mary McLeod Bethune graduated from Barber-Scotia College. So that's how far back this goes, and some huge luminaries in medicine and business that were women, that were trailblazers in the early 1900s. And they all, because Barber-Scotia was a place that you would come as a female right after the Civil War. So it's an amazing and a magical place. And I'm just honored to be able to be the person that's going to jumpstart the future of the institution again.
No, and I had the experience, and I may misspeak, but I don't know if it's a coronation or your induction, but it was
my investiture.
Your investiture. See, I knew I would misspeak, but when I went there, it was like a red carpet event. People were coming back, and just the optimism that I saw across the spectrum. Whether they were young, whether they were a bit more mature, whether they knew about the college, whether they didn't. And the one thing which now unfortunately has become, and I'm not making this political, a less favorable word, is the diversity of not only age, but also race, but also profession, but also mindset. There was so much, but what that did is that built an environment where people could raise their hand and say, hey, I want to volunteer. Hey, I want to volunteer. And I think by you fostering an environment where it was welcoming, but still focused, I think allowed you to do some things that amazed. I'm not going to say you, because you do stuff that you already know is going to work. One of my questions was going to be, how do you see into the future without a crystal ball? And if you got a crystal ball, share it with me. But how did you envision where you would be? Because I mean, now granted, I went and we talked before you made the decision. How did you see that? Because I think that's what holds a lot of people back in participating in civic environments and doing things to really grow their community, because they can't see the forest from the trees. How did you do that?
Yeah, that's a powerful question, Travis. I wish I could see into the future, because Lord knows I would try to get the Powerball numbers, and then that'll really make a difference in my life, right? But what I do know is that the formula is the same no matter what, and this is what I mean by that. If you put in the work, right? If you have core values about certain things that you believe, right? I fundamentally believe that the talents and the gifts that have been given to me are not for me to benefit, but for me to make a way for other people. I believe that. There's hands down no pretension behind that statement. I fundamentally believe that. So that means that every opportunity that I get, every leadership opportunity that I get, I take it so personal, because I recognize that is an opportunity for me to use the gift that I've gotten to create an opportunity for someone else, to make a way for someone else, to open up a pathway for somebody else. And so every time that you get those opportunities, I mean, the opportunities keep on coming, but you keep on falling back on your core value of who you are, right? And so that's why things just keep on working out for me. It's because when I got the opportunity to lead Spring Lake as mayor and all these great things happened, was because I knew that I was there to serve the people. When I got the opportunity to serve as president of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, I know that I only get 4 years to serve in that role. My time is winding down now, but here we are getting ready to break ground on a multi-million-dollar affordable housing complex in Washington, D.C., because I knew that it wasn't going to be about me. It was going to be about the individuals that I was going to celebrate and the families that I knew would one day be living under a roof that's going to be protective of them. When I took over Barber-Scotia College, I knew that that the talents that I have would turn the university around, or the college around, and then the individuals who will come to the school will eventually get in a better place for them to support their family, and how education will transform the life. I fundamentally believe that just the talents I have is for me to be transformative for somebody else. And so I just wait to see what else God is going to do, because I don't use the gifts for me. I really do believe that they're for other people, right? So that's my brother.
Well, I mean, and I think it was beautifully articulated. My pastor, the Reverend Dr. Jerry William Daly, has a saying where he says, "You are blessed to be a blessing," right? He just simply puts it that way, that whatever we get, if we give it away, guess what? We getting something else, and we should be looking to give it away. And I think your talents, your treasures, your time that you put into whatever you do certainly reaps benefit. I can tell you that as a friend, being able to call you and we opine over some, stuff for me that's difficult. And you say, "Hey, have you thought about this? Or have you thought, well, what about this?" And that's why I really enjoy the level of transparency, but also the level of humility, because again, me thinking about it, the president of the largest, and we've traveled together. I know what being the president of the largest fraternity means. And I've been able to reap what I call some of them residual benefits of hanging around the prayers. So it has been a wonderful experience just to see that maturation and growth. But I do want to shift gears a little bit, because, I wouldn't ask you up if I didn't have questions. And so I know a lot of people have talked to me about kind of shifts in government and what that means. But ultimately, can you explain a little bit about executive orders and how do we interpret those as, and I'm, for myself, a non-legal or litigious person? I know you have a degree in law. You're very well versed in that space. You do the consulting thing, but how could you explain that to me so that when people ask me, I could give them a purposeful answer about what they mean and how it may impact them moving forward?
Sure. So the Constitution, so Article 2 of the Constitution vests the president with executive power over the government, right? Including the obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And an executive order is a written directive that's signed by the president that orders the government to take specific actions to ensure the laws be faithfully executed. Now, it might mean telling the Department of Education to implement a certain rule or declaring a new policy priority. So executive orders, however, cannot override federal laws and statutes, right? So statutes have to be passed by Congress and signed by the president, or then it's vetoed, and then Congress must then override the veto for the bill to become law, right? So executive orders can't preempt that process. And so I think as people are watching all of these various executive orders that are coming out of the White House right now, they're going to be scrutinized. They're going to be looked at. Some will be challenged in the courts that will then determine if that particular executive order has overstepped its boundaries. Is it impacting some kind of law that it should not, right? So again, executive orders, the president says, this is a great example in this broadcast here, which is the president before, current president, put out an executive order that said that they wanted all of the government agencies to look at their diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. They ordered all of their leaders to look at how are we making sure that all people across the board is being treated? What policies do they have in place for promotions? Are we making sure that the government looks like the people that it's serving, right? So that was an executive order that came from the White House to all the government agencies. Now, they weren't breaking any laws. This was a policy change that the president asked to be done. Then the new president came in and said, I want to take away that policy. I don't want you to consider DEI as a part of your day-to-day policy thinking or development any longer, right? It will just be what it will be. People will get promoted how they get promoted. There will not be a consideration to make sure that we have a diverse group in the room. If it ends up being all one color, then that's just the way it's going to be. And this administration is fine with that. That's what an executive order is.
Okay. So it is, I mean, first off, beautifully said. You have simplified about 17 Google searches, 7 or 8 different YouTube videos I was looking at. I should have just called you in the first place. I should have just called you. But I think that helps people to understand it's not, and not to say I'm minimizing any of the orders. I know they impact a lot of people in different ways, but it is the proclivity of person in power to make a decision as what he or she wants people to focus on.
That's right.
And there are groups on both sides all the time that are both positively and negatively impacted by decisions that say we'll do X or we'll do Y.
That's right.
I think what people want to know, and I'm saying people because I'm part of people, how do we insulate ourselves? Well, first, how do we educate ourselves to what it means and what the law could do? Secondly, how do we insulate ourselves if we fall into one of those vulnerable categories?
Yeah.
Educate and then insulate.
Educate and insulate. So the education piece, I would first tell anyone, which this is a skill and it's not easy in the very beginning, but you have to sift through the noise, right? At the end of the day, the current administration, this current president he has a showmanship side, right? It's a part of his DNA, right? So the shock and awe factor, I'm going to do this, and so it really catches people off guard. And then what ends up happening is that you're focusing on what that oh wow moment, right? That they just mentioned. But a part of the education piece is kind of what you just did, which is, well, let me just go and make sure I understand what an executive order is, right? And then realize that, okay, he's really technically not, he's creating policy, but he's not creating law. Right? I don't think that's a big difference for people to understand. Now, the policies impact the lives of people, right? It will impact the American people based off of the policies that he is implementing, but he's not creating law. You would know that if you took some time and did some research and realized that the president has his executive power is to create policies that is going to make sure that the government runs a certain kind of way. That's what the Constitution has vested him with, right? And so I think a part of, the education piece for us is making sure that you separate the showman side and then take the next step, which is, let me block out the noise. Let me see what this is about. And really, don't get caught up in the hype, but really see how is this executive order or how is this policy impacting the lives of people? And does that matter to me? Does that matter to my core value, right? Is immigration law, or do I feel personally that immigrants are taking over our country? You got to ask yourself that, so that when you see how the policies are being implemented now, how they're rounding up folks, how they're detaining individuals, how they're deporting them over. Does that meet your core value? And so then you ask yourself, does the policy, now maybe you may have done it a different way, how they're going about it. But the reality is that if it is a part of what you believe, then the policy fits who you are. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of folks, a lot of individuals, that woke up and voted, for the policies and changes that we're seeing today. Right. And so I think that, you got to understand that we are here because a group of people felt a certain kind of way. The other side of it, when you talked about insulation, how do we insulate ourselves? I don't know if I have an answer for that one, because, you could get caught right up into the wave of it, depending on where you are. I am sure that there are individuals who voted for this particular administration, and they are, and they're unemployed today. I believe that, right? So they weren't able to insulate themselves from the change because I don't think that they understood how far sweeping it could be and how it will be. Now, there is a fundamental change. I mean, a fundamental belief in that the size of government should be a certain way, and then the majority of the people should be in the private sector. That's is what we voted on in November, that ideology. And while there's another ideology that says, we need a robust government to be able to service the American people because the threats today are completely different than the threats that we had 50 years ago or 100 years ago, right? And it takes more people because we have more people in the country. So I think the ideologies right now is what's going back and forth. And so you have to ask yourself, am I going to get swept up into these ideologies? And I think the way that you may end up insulating yourself is making sure that your livelihood may not be tied to the government right now. And that's just truth, because that's where a lot of, challenges are going to come for a lot of people.
No, I mean, and I really like the way how you laid it out. And you didn't do it to polarize good or bad. You just said, hey, this part agrees with these policies. This part agrees with these policies. Those policies are literally diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
And I didn't appreciate, and when you say it now, I'm like, duh, that concept of big government versus little government. Little government and run it at your state level. And this isn't, and the thing that I've been trying to tell people, but certainly did not have the ability to articulate it that you did, this is not new. This has been going on where this ideology of,
have you not seen the play Hamilton? I mean, it is the play. It's Hamilton.
Yeah.
This is Hamilton, right? I mean, literally happening right before us.
Right. And I'm not underscoring. I know it creates a fair amount of strain for people, but when I watch it, it encourages me, and I know that sounds oxymoronical to some degree, but it encourages me to learn more, to ask these questions, to get more civically educated as to, oh, okay, well, this happens. That's actually not a bad thing, but it's going to affect this over here. Darn it. Okay. And that's what you say, get past the shock and awe, right? The shock and awe is great for TV, but in real life, okay, what does this policy mean? How does it impact me and the people that I love? Okay, that's what happens here. Oh, this is going to be wide sweeping. And I think taking that critical appraisal is a challenge, right? Because when we think about it, as citizens, we're driven by our leaders. And whenever we see a leader that runs countercurrent to what our minds say a good leader is, and I'm making air quotes, y'all. If y'all are listening to the podcast, you can't, but I'm using air quotes of a good leader. But I think to some degree, leadership has to be disruptive, right? Meaning if you keep, there was a book by General Honore that talks about leadership in the new normal. We're there now, right? And again, not that I wanted to throw a softball, but, you were a part of a project that really critically appraised leadership, looked at different tenets. And again, the title of that book, if you all want it, Disruptive Leader. Talk about the book and what encouraged you to be a part of that project. I know there were a couple other authors. I'll let you talk about it, your role in it, and the key tenets from that book so that people can go and grab their copy today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And, I got to, of course, do a quick shout out to my other two co-authors, Dr. Kelly Dixon and Dr. Danielle Green, two phenomenal women who in this space of higher ed really want to bring to light, because of the issues of the day, what the power of what a disruptive leader is and what they mean, what that means, right? So when they asked me to be a part of the project, I couldn't turn it down, because when I thought about my own journey, I was like, man, I've been a disruptive leader my whole life.
You say this ain't new. That's what I do.
Yeah, I'm not new to this. This is the real deal, right? A disruptive leader their mindset is different, right? It's like a dynamic approach to knowing how to navigate complexities, right? That's what a dynamic leader is, in driving innovation, reshaping industries in the face of consistent change, right? But the underlying part of this book, and I won't give too much because I want folks to go out and get it, right? Is that to be a disruptive leader is really about building relationships. And a lot of people think that now that I'm the leader, I'm in charge and it's going to be what I say. In the book, we're going to talk about a series of relationships, right? And how you having true relationships is what's going to make the difference for you to be a disruptive leader. Because then in the end, you will learn that the disruption doesn't come from you. It comes from the people who are working with you to disrupt, right? That's what disruptive leadership is that you have convinced a group of people to come into a complex issue and situation for you all to think different and then come out with a whole entirely different outcome. Now, of course, you will get the credit because you're the person at the top, because you also don't get the blame if it doesn't go right, right?
Exactly.
But the way that you got there was by the relationships that you have fostered and grew along the way to get to that point. So whenever the right opportunity comes to you, or the right opportunity for me was to be the president of Barber-Scotia College. When I took over the college, I was the only employee. There was nobody else.
Man.
Right? So when they gave me the keys that day and, the interim president, drove off, with the wheels spinning and the dust hitting me in the face while they was going off, I stood there with the keys and I stood on the platform of the administration building and I looked around the campus and I said, okay, God, let's go. And the next call I made after I got those keys was building a team of individuals who believe in what was possible, who believe that they could help me save an historically Black college. And you fast forward a year and a half later, we had no students. Now we got 100 applications that came in a couple of weeks ago. So, but it was because I had a group of people that I built relationships with that has allowed for me to help to disrupt what is getting ready to happen on the HBCU landscape. That's what the power of a disruptive leader is. And that comes in a lot of different forms, right? One could say that our current administration is disruptive, but the thing is, they're not disruptive by themselves. And people have to realize that. Disruption at any level, whether at the federal government level, at the White House, or right down to your local Girl Scout troop, it gotta be you and a couple other folks that are willing to make the changes necessary.
No, and again, for all of you all out there, you got to get the book. He didn't give me a whole lot of lead time on this. So I had to speed read in chapter 6. Read the whole book, but chapter 6 and chapter 7. If you had to, and I know this going backwards, right? But go to chapter 6, go to chapter 7, and then restart. Because I did it the traditional way and speed reading. But chapter 6 is drive change through relationship. And then chapter 7 is using experimentation to facilitate change. And when you think about a lot of the things that you've done, and when you think about what's going on at both the local, state, and national level, that's what it is. There is these relationships that have already been developed. And then once I'm in place, okay, I'm going to put these people in place because these are the people that are going to help me facilitate this experiment, because I just do want things to change, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think when we look at change, especially now, this is me using that piece from a medical standpoint. For me, that's what it takes to really change your heart health, right? You have to go into it understanding that my patients and we got a relationship, right? By the time they see me, damage has already been done, unfortunately. And so then it's about building trust in a snapshot and saying, hey, look, trust me, these medicines, even though I know you don't want to take them, they're going to help us have time to fix these other things. But at the same time, we're going to have to experiment. Let's experiment with you walking 10 minutes a day to start. Let's experiment with you, eating your last meal no later than 8 o'clock. Let's experiment with you doing yoga. Let's experiment with you working. Nowhere in there did you hear me say, you got to do this or get this procedure. No, let's experiment with first changing your mindset, right? Because that's the toughest thing. And I'm not And when I talk to my patients, I'm talking to them from personal experience to say, hey, look, I'm not as young as I used to be. And many of the things that I tell them, I'm doing myself, whether it's walking, learning to relax, building relationships with friends. But it's that change through experimentation that really allows us to take that next leap and really be disruptive leaders of ourselves, right? That self piece that's in there. Now, and I know you got to run. We talked. I know you have a busy schedule, but are there any portions in the book that you say, hey, look, I know you like chapter 6 and 7, but my spot is blank. What's the spot in that book that maybe and I hadn't read the whole book, but I got to tell you, I had to speed read because my book came in yesterday. So I'm gonna hop on the part that you like. What's the part that you can embrace and take from the book?
Yeah. So, I think that the beautiful part of leadership is it's about the journey, right? Chapter 11, I think is called, the journey as a disruptive leader, right? I think there's beauty in the journey. And I think a lot of people, when I think about like the opportunities that I have today. But when I was in the military and I was leading troops and I was an IT guy and I'm learning the MDMP process, wondering why am I doing that? Or when I ended up becoming legally trained, or I became the mayor of a city, or I became an entrepreneur in certain spaces. Sometimes in my own journey, I felt like, man, God, I feel like I'm just all over the place, right? I just did. I mean, that's just being transparent. Like, I felt like I'm all over the place. And then you get a job like this where I need to be somewhat politically savvy to deal with the city and the county and the state and the federal government. I need to have an entrepreneurial spirit because I'm literally restarting an entire institution. I need to have a legal background because of the policies and the procedures that was going to be critical that I'm going to be rebuilding for our institution. The military training comes absolutely in hand. It comes in hand now because all I'm doing is taking the MDMP process and flipping it and putting it on a higher education platform now, which is allowing us to reach targets that we probably would not have met had I not had that training. So all of those different phases of my journey has allowed for me to get to a place now where I will be the ultimate disruptive leader, right? So I would say, it's the beauty in the journey, and chapter 11 talks a little bit about that. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you saw my show notes, but that was my next question. My next question was, do you consider yourself, and I think I know the answer to this, a disruptive leader? And if so, what are 3, 4, or 5 things that you could tell others on how to be a disruptive leader? You kind of answered it, but if you could summate that, then I'm not going to, like I said, whenever I got you, I try to get as much as I can, because there's no telling folks when I'm going to catch them again. I don't know.
I know. So I don't know if it's, I would just say you got to be open to building a real network of people to be with you, because you don't know what the assignment is going to be. Right. But what I do know is that whatever the assignment that's going to be given to you is not going to be just you. Right? It's going to be you and a group of people that's going to execute it. And I think a lot of people think that because now they have the title, it's going to be me. I got it. No, you're just a part of this bigger plan. And so you have to have other people to be with you. The other piece to it is in realizing that you can't have I call it the Moses complex, which is your assignment may not be to get the entire project across the finish line. And you need to be good with that. There's a lot of people who always want to see everything all the way through. And one of the challenges as a leader is recognizing that your assignment may just have been the person to file the paperwork, right? So here I am, we're getting ready to break ground on a multi-million-dollar affordable housing complex here in Washington, D.C. But the project didn't start with me, started with the president before me, right? Who, we had the ideas and the concepts in his administration. It was my administration that got the team together, worked with the city, got the money, got the investors, and now we're going to break ground. But it will be another president that will actually get to cut the ribbon on the project as the sitting president, right? And so I got to be good with that. And I don't need to remind the world that it was because of me that no, that president will take credit for that opportunity in that time, right? And so you have to be comfortable with that as a leader, of knowing that you may not see the project all the way through. So be good with what your assignment is in the project process. Right. And then the last piece I would say is, never underestimate the power of being humble as a leader. Never underestimate the power of humbleness, right? In the grand scheme of things, the Bible says that all things passes away. Nobody's going to remember your name. They're not going to remember what you did. So all you have is right now to do the best that you can while you can. So even though I get the honor and the privilege to serve as the 20th president of Barber-Scotia, the 36th president of Phi Beta Sigma, the 13th mayor of Spring Lake, North Carolina, 100 years from now, no one will know what I did. No one. And so you have to be good with that. And a part of being good with that is just being humble in the moment of knowing you just have an assignment for a time. Do the best you can while you can, because you will not be able to do it forever. And when your time is up, you step off the stage and you just go on to whatever the next assignment is. So I was driving through, I'm going to close with this. I was driving through Spring Lake a couple of weeks ago. I went down to Fayetteville. Had a client down there. And I was driving through Spring Lake and I saw this lady pushing a stroller on the sidewalk. I remember when I was mayor, there was huge parts of the city that did not have any sidewalks. They had very worn paths. I called them goat trails. So it was like this goat trail leading up to Walmart. And I remember seeing a lady pushing her stroller. Well, this is back in 2011 when I got elected. And she had was pushing it on the trail, and she had stepped off into the road and then got back on the goat trail. And I, remember having the conversation with the city council about us investing in sidewalks, right? And of course, there was a lot of heme and hawing, but eventually we found the money and we made it happen, and we ended up putting a lot of sidewalks around the entire city. So when I was driving through the city a couple of weeks ago, I saw this lady pushing her stroller, ironically another mother, pushing her stroller on that sidewalk. And I thought to myself immediately, I said, she doesn't know how that sidewalk got there, who advocated for that, who made that happen. I did. And I was proud of that moment. But you have to be good with knowing that no one will ever know that it was you who did it. And that has to be okay as a leader. But what I do know is that the intent was made, because if she's pushing her stroller on that sidewalk, there's 100 more women who's doing the same thing, or fathers are doing the same thing, and they are safely being able to get to their destination. So how many lives did we save? All because we decided to put some sidewalks in our community. That's the difference. That's the power of just being humble and just knowing what your assignment is and just keep driving on,
Man. Brother, see, you still got me wanting to listen to stories and to hear the Sidewalk Chronicles. My good, I didn't know that, but I can remember growing up in Spring Lake, walking on those, as you say, goat trails. And we were nifty enough to move out of the way where the speeding car would come. But those are the things that I think as a citizen, we take for granted.
That's right.
And government, I think if it were easy, everybody would do it. It's hard, right? That's why you'll never hear me be, and I'll say, critical, right? Because every decision has ups and downs, right? Someone's going to be affected positively, someone's going to be affected negatively, no matter what happens. And your perception of that is based on, again, like you said, your core values. But again, I thank you for coming on and talking to us. And as we start to reframe how we can take those steps to become a disruptive leader, I'll hearken it back to something one of my newest friends, I met him a week ago, and I'm going to say it a little different than he did. He says, everyone has 3 components at stages in your life where you are. And for me, I say, call it going to the lab, L-A-B. First, you have to learn your lessons. And that's what you talked about, not knowing why you were a mayor, not knowing why you started up, black government at your college, not knowing how you translated various things that you did into entrepreneurial pursuits. It are those lessons that you learned to build your toolkit. Second, you have to identify the A in lab is assignment. You can't say where you're going to work or what you're going to do or what, God has for you in that space. But once you know those lessons, he puts you in assignment to hone those skills. And that was what you talked about doing. And then finally, the B in that lab is blessings. Just as we said earlier, we are blessed to be a blessing to others. And whether it's your insight, your vision, your attitude, or your passion, brother, you are truly a blessing to me. So as we wrap up this episode of the About That Life podcast, I want to say thank you to my guest, my friend, my brother, Chris Ray, Esquire, President Ray. He has so many accolades. I don't want to do him injustice, but as you can see, that leadership isn't easy. The onus is on us to really understand what our lessons are, approach our assignments with happiness, and finally look forward to the blessing that we'll receive just to give it away. To understand, to truly live intentionally forever, we have to be disruptive leaders. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
We truly hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, share it with a friend, leave a comment, and certainly join us for our next episode of the About That Life podcast.